This is your wake-up call.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
In its report, Defeating Harper, Lead Now claims credit for defeating 24 Conservative incumbents in the 2015 election. Can you summarize how in that election Lead Now used funds and in-kind support from the U.S.-based Tides Foundation and other foreign actors and organizations?
The first thing you have to recognize is that money coming in through Tides U.S. or any other foreign foundation is delivered to Tides Canada or many other foundations here that support activism. So you don't really, at the end of the day, always find out who's supporting who or which activist group is getting money from where. But I can tell you that in the study of just one riding, when we looked at the costs that were, that gave advantage to certain candidates, we covered everything from flights, because we knew in some cases where people were flying from as members of a team, and travel, whether it's car or whatever, from Toronto to London. We covered signs, banners, flyers, advertising material, radio time that they didn't have to pay for, food, T-shirts, rent locations, phone banks. The Lead Now office actually was in the Centre for Social Innovation in Toronto. I don't know how they paid for that, but that's where they their main office was. Polling's expensive. Any candidate is going to have to pay for all these things, but this was given freely. Facebook ads, online ads. David Suzuki was involved in a number of these campaigns and traveled with the crew to many different locations. That's hotel rentals and whatnot.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bongspool. For you, Madam Chair, do you believe that any candidates received this kind of support in the 2015 election and did not report it to Elections Canada? Do you have evidence of that?
We couldn't find any evidence that anyone reported in-kind expenses from activist organizations, and yet at least 11 were targeted with full staff. I mean, here we had 7 staff members. They're all on salary. They're not volunteers, but they're dressed like volunteers, and they all had to get here, and they're working with Mr. Suzuki and a member of Mr. Suzuki's staff. So 11,
Ms. Bongspool, 11 candidates received in-kind support with full staffs and did not report that.
According to the Defeating Harper report, 11 cities or campaigns were targeted with the staff. A lot of other cities did not have the staff. Those were where they had a primary interest in defeating the Conservative candidate and thought they had the best chance.
And you reported this to Elections Canada, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Elections Canada wasn't able to do anything about it. Will you undertake to provide this committee with supporting documentation that you have?
Absolutely. Okay.
Much for that. I'm going to turn my attention now to and ask a question of Mr. Luprecht. You referred to the United Front Work Department, and at the Ethics Committee, the brother of the Prime Minister, in respect of $140,000 so-called donation to the Trudeau Foundation, said that there was not the possibility of foreign interference and that the donation came from a Canadian company, a company that is a shell company based in Montreal, out of a house that is controlled by a company called the China Cultural Industry Association, which is part of the United Front Work Department. Do you agree that in that context there's not the possibility of foreign interference, or would you say that there was?
Mr. Cooper, open source documentation raising concerns about this donation dates back to 2016. And so we have had ample time to have an honest discussion, which I think is not, people are not prepared to have. It is also why people are resisting a foreign agent registry, because of the number of Canadian elites that would get ensnarled in such a registry.
How much time?
24 seconds.
Mr. Luprecht, I'll just allow you to use the balance of your time to add anything you wish.
These are very serious matters in a parliamentary democracy, and there are many options available to the government today if it wants to show that it is serious about defending Canadian democracy. We need to decide, are we standing with the tyrants, or are we standing up for Canadian democracy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the fact that I only have an opportunity to ask one question, Mr. Luprecht, in your opening remarks, you suggested that the Prime Minister may have misled Parliament.
Now that it appears that the Prime Minister may have misled Parliament, which is a very serious matter in a Westminster constitutional democracy, that is yet more reason for an independent public inquiry. Canada needs to draw red lines to stand up to bad actors by sending a cordial yet clear message that breaking Canadian law to constrain Canadian sovereign decision-making is unacceptable and will have real consequences. Je vous remercie.
Would you give us the context in which you believe that that the Prime Minister may have misled Parliament?
I believe statements made over recent days and the way some of the communication has shifted with regards to Member Chong are highly problematic, and that in itself, I think, is reason to understand that, as I've reinforced, the legislative framework in place and our national security posture is insufficiently robust. Many of these problems could be solved by an Australian approach that has an automatic 5-year review built in. Our last systematic review of our national security framework, if you want, goes back to 1981, the MacDonald Commission. Clearly, we need a more systematic approach. It is not clear to me whether the Prime Minister's statement were with intent or was simply a function of the information, the best information available at the time, but it clearly shows that in terms of ministerial responsibility, there are some challenges in terms of the coordination between the Prime Minister and his own department and the statements that he subsequently has made on the matter.